When it comes to building a premiership winning team in the AFL, there is arguably nothing more important than drafting well. The roots of just about any flag-winning or dynasty team can be traced back to at least one or two good drafts where they selected players who helped set up their teams in the long term. In this video, we're going to be looking back at some of the best single draft hauls in AFL history, in which a group of youngsters were selected to help set up some of the greatest teams of all time. For the Richmond Football Club, the 2000s was a miserable decade. They managed only one finals appearance during this time, while finishing bottom 4 5 times and collecting 2 wooden spoons. If the Tigers were to change their fortunes going forward, then they needed to nail their 2009 off-season, and that they did. Alongside appointing new coach Damien Hardwick, they struck gold in that year's draft. Despite finishing second last on the ladder that year, Richmond's first selection in the national draft came at pick 3, after Melbourne got awarded a priority pick after finishing bottom of the ladder 2 years in a row with under 5 wins. There was a sliding doors moment in round 18 of that season when the two bottom teams faced off, Richmond coming out on top with a kick after the siren, cementing Melbourne on bottom of the ladder. Had the Tigers lost this game, it's highly likely they would have finished bottom of the ladder and Melbourne wouldn't have had access to their start of round 1 priority pick. Seemingly this is the result Melbourne wanted though, as there were many accusations of Melbourne tanking this season. In the end though, it was Richmond who ended up benefiting in the draft as a result of this game, as with pick 3 in the draft, they took the greatest finals player of all time in Dustin Martin. Dusty needs no introduction. He was pivotal throughout their dynasty years from 2017 to 2020. He collected the Norm Smith medal in each of their premiership years, which included perhaps one of the greatest grand final performances of all time in 2020. Dusty was arguably the most important draft pick for any club in history. However, he wasn't the only player Richmond would take in this draft that would help set up their future. David Asprey was taken at pick 35 in this draft, and while he doesn't quite have the accolades of Martin, he was an important player throughout the dynasty years, playing in all 3 of their premiership seasons. He finished with a total of 155 games and was an important cog in their defence. Outside of the national draft, Richmond also had one pick in the pre-season draft that followed, where they took future All-Australian, best and fairest, and captain of the football club, Dylan Grimes. Grimes would be an especially important player after one of their greatest defenders of all time, Alex Rance, retired at the end of the 2019 season. Rance did his ACL in round 1 of 2019, and most people thought that that would put a line through Richmond's premiership chances that season, but Grimes held his own excellently and even managed to pick up an All-Australian blazer that year. All in all, the 2009 off-season was nailed by Richmond, and it helped set up their rise back to the top of the AFL ladder. The West Coast Eagles have long been one of the most successful clubs in the AFL. During the mid-2000s especially, they were a force to be reckoned with. They had absolute superstars all over the field, and they managed to make back-to-back grand finals in 2005 and 2006, winning the latter. There were a lot of factors which went into building this mid-2000s West Coast team, but arguably the most important moments were the selections they made at the 2001 AFL draft. They ended up picking 3 premiership players in both the national and rookie drafts this year, none better though than Chris Judd, one of the best players in the 21st century. Of course, Judd didn't play his whole career at the Eagles, but during his time spent in Perth, he certainly made a mark. He made the All-Australian team twice, including a Brownlow winning season in 2004 and an AFL Players MVP in 2006. In the first of the 2 grand finals West Coast played that era, the club might have lost the game, but Judd was still good enough to take home the 2005 Norm Smith medal before captaining his side to a premiership the following season. He departed the Eagles for Carlton at the end of the 2007 season, but is still regarded as one of West Coast's all-time great players. As well as Judd, they also selected Mark Seaby and Ashley Hansen in the national draft, who both played in that premiership team, as well as Quinton Lynch in the rookie draft, who played 209 games for the club and was their leading goal scorer in the premiership season of 2006. Notably, they also selected Ashley Sampi with pick 6 in this draft, who played 78 games for the club and is most known for his 2004 Mark of the Year. For the West Coast Eagles, 2001 will always be known as the year that they selected Chris Judd in the draft. However, their other selections were also pivotal to how they became the best team in the AFL during the mid-2000s. This next draft haul probably doesn't have the same calibre of superstar players as the last two I talked about. However, for the Sydney Swans, the 2002 AFL draft period was an incredibly successful one to set them up for not one but two premiership tilts. In the national draft, they picked up 3 premiership players, Jared McVeigh, Sean Dempster and Nick Malceski. They also picked up Craig Bolton in the pre-season draft and Paul Bevan in the rookie draft. Both went on to play in their 2005 premiership team. While you wouldn't say this draft had any all-time greats or legends of the game, it certainly was the draft that kept on giving. McVeigh and Malceski didn't get the opportunity to play in the 2005 Grand Final, but did play pivotal roles 7 years later in the 2012 Grand Final, McVeigh captaining the team to a premiership win, while Malceski was responsible for perhaps the 2 greatest goals in the club's history.
Trying to get the ball out. Malceski, a left footer. Can he get the hook? It's pretty good. It's a chance. It's a goal.
Savage, Hanbury to Malceski. Is that the grand final? Sydney are premiers.
Well, there's no doubting that Hawthorn in the early and mid-2010s were one of the greatest teams in AFL history. And to create a team as successful as that, there's no doubt you need a strong foundation. And that is exactly what Hawthorn made for themselves in not one, but 2 drafts 3 years apart from each other in 2001 and 2004. We'll start off with 2001. Well, not many teams can say that they selected 2 future premiership captains in one draft, but that's exactly what Hawthorn did here when they took Luke Hodge and Sam Mitchell in the national draft. Not to mention they also selected Rick Ladson and Campbell Brown, both who played over 100 games for the club and both who played in their 2008 premiership triumph over an incredible Geelong team. It really is incredible to see what this group of players achieved. There's a combined 10 premierships in this draft class, 6 All-Australians and 7 Best and Fairest awards. And now, post-retirement from playing football, Sam Mitchell is back at Hawthorn as the head coach, guiding Hawthorn towards success again. It's quite incredible stuff really, but maybe the craziest part is that 3 years later, they arguably produced an even better haul of players. Jared Ruffhead, Lance Franklin, Jordan Lewis. They were Hawthorn's 3 first selections in the 2004 draft. These 3 players would go on to win multiple premiership medals with the Hawks, produce countless All-Australian seasons, and receive countless other accolades. Ruffhead and Franklin together were the most potent key forward duo this century, and Lewis worked perfectly in tandem with Mitchell and Hodge in the midfield. I also selected Clinton Young in the rookie draft this year, who played in their 2008 premiership team, just topping off what a fantastic haul this draft was for Hawthorn. Moving on to the last 2 draft hauls that I want to talk about in this video, and I think that they are perhaps the best 2 draft hauls in history, and they're only 2 years apart from each other. From the same club, the Geelong Cats in 1999 struck gold. Joel Corey, Paul Chapman, Cameron Ling and Corey Enright. Between them, there's 12 premierships, 11 All-Australian selections, 6 Best and Fairest awards and 1 Norm Smith medal. It doesn't get much better than that. Ling was a 3-time premiership player and perhaps the best tagging midfielder of all time. Corey Enright, along with Matthew Scarlett, was probably the best defender of his generation. Chapman was a 2-time All-Australian and played over 250 games for the club, and Joel Corey was a very dependable midfielder. If you think it doesn't get any better than that, let's take a look at their 2001 draft haul. In that year's class, they picked up Jimmy Bartell, James Kelly, Steve Johnson, and arguably the greatest player of all time, Gary Ablett. The list of accolades that group of players won is almost too long to list off. Ablett needs no introduction. His feats and resume speaks for itself. Bartell was a Brownlow medalist and a brilliant player throughout his entire career. Johnson was one of the best medium forwards in the AFL this century, And while Kelly probably doesn't have the same reputation as these other three, he still was a very dependable player for that club. Honestly, it's take your pick between this draft and the 1999 draft for Geelong as to which is the best of all time. I think you could make arguments for each, but really it was just crazy how good Geelong were at identifying talent that would set them up for future years to come during this period of time. And there's no doubt in my mind that these were the greatest 2 draft hauls in AFL history. So those were some of the greatest draft years for clubs that I could find. I'm sure there are some other great ones that I left out of this video. Let me know down in the comment section below if you believe that I missed out on any great draft hauls that should have been in this video. Please also leave a like and subscribe if you did enjoy the video, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.